My bad. There we go. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Pablo Valdes. I'm a previous software engineer at NVIDIA, and I'm currently a junior at Florida International University studying computer science. So some of my favorite languages and tools include Git and GitHub. And a fun fact about me is my last name is Valdez with an S, and I'm a professional vibe coder. So today we're going to be going over Git and GitHub. So this is going to be a technical session, and you're going to learn essentially the basics and an introduction to Git/GitHub, so you can be able to have version management over your projects and follow best developer practices. And so what even is Git and why should you care, right? Because if you're new to Git, you don't know what it's for, right? So Git is essentially a way to version control the changes to your code. And what that means is essentially like, let's say you have a document, say it's like, it could be any file, right? It could even be just like a Word document or something like that, right? Git would essentially allow you to save and record changes as you go through it. And so that's useful because maybe you want to like save a state, think like a video game. Maybe you want to save some part you're on and then you make some changes to it and you realize you want to go back. So Git would allow you to do that because it would kind of store those checkpoints. And GitHub is essentially where you would host all those Git repositories, which includes all those Gits, right? So that's where you'd go to see your Gits and Gits other people have all in one place. And if you didn't have Git or a version control system, the issue with that would be that you wouldn't be able to easily save work and changes over time, right? So, and you'd have no idea who changed what or when, and it'd just be really difficult to collaborate with other developers because if they make a change and they overwrite yours, you'd have no way of going back, right? So what Git gives you is a complete history of every change, the ability to undo mistakes, experiment with different branches, which are like different parts of your code, and have seamless team collaboration, right? So every developer knows Git and they use it. This is a standard skill and it's used everywhere in the industry. And I've included some resources for Git, including some documentations and an interactive lesson by GitHub. So you'll find that in the slide. And so some essential Git commands are git clone, which essentially, if you're on GitHub, it allows you to clone a Git repo, right? So this has all those changes and you could clone it to your computer. So what you would do here is you'd essentially, well, first off, what you'd want to do is download Git, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So you go to Git, download, and you go to the installation, and you'd essentially download Git for your device, right? So if you're on Windows, you download the, like, say, x64 or Mac, your ARM processor. So you just download Git and now you have it on your system, right? And if you open the terminal and you've installed Git successfully, you could do git dash dash version and you actually be able to see your Git version right here. So right now I have 2.50.1, right? So this is one of the latest Git versions. So with this, I can now use Git, right? And what you also need is something like a IDE, like VS Code. So you want an IDE to essentially, let's say you're using Git to write code, right? Which is what most people use it for. Now you could use Git to track any changes, but it's mostly used for code and collaboration. So you need an editor to write that code, right? And now with Git, you could actually use it. You could use it either in the terminal inside the editor, right? You could use it inside the terminal, or you could use it right here in this little panel on the side where it says source control. And so over here, you can manage the version controlling of your project. And most of the time, you're actually going to be using the command line, right? Because you'll find it's a lot faster. So you want to know the controls and commands for that. So let's go back to the 6 essential commands. So the first one is git clone, like I said, right? So you'd go on GitHub. So you want to make sure you actually have a GitHub account first. You just sign in and you create one. And then you could go on any GitHub project or GitHub repo, I mean, and you could just kick code. You kick clone. And so now this is the link for this repository. And then you could do something like, let's open a new, let's make a new project here. Okay. Actually, let's just make a new folder here. Call it Git project, right? Git project. Open VS Code. We click open. Let's go to projects and we'll click Git project. Okay. Let me share my entire screen. Here we go. Can we see it? Should be showing my entire screen now. Can't see it. Sharing.
Yeah, you checking as well? What's your email?
Oops.
Can you type? Yeah, type. With that. What? I think it's working like 2 weeks. What? I think it's working like 2 weeks ago. You have to check in. You get that eraser, but you need to check it out. You're coming? Or yes, this is Brad. Yeah, can you hear me? Did the DA call you? Wow. Yeah. Yeah, your eraser. So now.
Hold shift to share multiple windows.
Okay.
All right, there we go. Share everything.
Okay. Yeah, I am seeing there, but I don't see them with alcohol. But yeah, I don't know.
That's
They're coming.
is it not updating?
I don't know where you.
Pause screen share. I don't know why it's not sharing my entire screen.
Okay. Okay.
Portion of screen. What?
Um, can you go to the VA and ask for a picture? And type, you cannot use the bathroom. You can use there. Because they can. Yeah. What happened?
Apologies for the technical delay.
I'm gonna check.
So what I did is essentially I made a new project called Git project. I'll do it again. Just make the new project, open it in VS Code using open. We opened it.
He left. Yeah.
And like I was saying, in your command line, once you've installed Git, you could do git dash dash version. And you can see the version. And in here, you'd be able to use Git in the command line inside your editor. And you'd be able to initialize a repository and keep track of all your Git changes over here on the side panel where it says source control. And you can initialize a Git repository here and connect it to your GitHub account. So any changes you make inside of VS Code will be sent directly to that Git repository inside of GitHub, right? But the actual Git repo lives inside your computer. So there's a secret folder there tracking all those changes you've made. And you could publish those changes to GitHub so you could share them with other people, right? And so right here, if I want to git clone this repository, I could go over here on GitHub. I could click HTTPS, copy this. I'll go back in my editor and I could do git clone and I'll post that link. And so now that's copying essentially the entire repository. So I'll have it all right here and I could use it as I want. So everything on this Git repo is now on my computer. So let's go back to the presentation. Some of the other commands are git status, which lets you see essentially the changes that you've made. Git add file or git add dot, which lets you add new files to your Git repo. So essentially what Git is doing is it's making a folder where you add all these changes. So you could add those changes specifically by adding specific files, or you could just add all the changes if you've made. The fourth command is git commit -m message, right? So git commit lets you put a message with your commits. And what a commit is what you're like deciding, okay, I'm gonna save this to the repository. And you could add a message to that to just make it clearer. So you might say add login feature. Some people have a way of making it like more specific. So they might have an explicit way of doing it where they might do something like beat, like for feature, login, add login system.
Yeah.
So some people might have specific ways of doing commits just to make it more concise. And git push lets you add your changes to GitHub, right? So if you want to actually push those changes, you do git push and then that would send it all to the remote repository on GitHub. Git pull lets you get the latest changes from GitHub. And you usually use that when you're in a team setting, right? So you have team members that have done some changes to the code and you want to get those changes, you do git pull to get the latest Git version, like Git changes, I mean. So that's good for team activities. Some resources right here. Let's go over that quickly. So this is a simple Git cheat sheet that I've provided. And it essentially lets you have all the Git commands in like one place. So it's really simple to just see them all and remember it. Kind of like a reference sheet once you've understood what each of these commands do, right? So you have steps for setup, configuration, inspecting and comparing. And this all has to do with just files, right? So if you want to remove files from Git, if you want to compare file changes, if you want to change Git history, because this is linear. Think of it like a linked list, if you know what that is. Some of the most basic commands you'll be using pretty much every single day is stuff like git pull origin main. This is just to get like the latest code inside a project. Let's say you're working at a company and you're using GitLab or GitHub. Both are places where Gits are essentially stored and managed. Then you could use something like git pull origin main to get the latest code. Maybe your teammates made some changes overnight to the repository you're working on. So you want to get those changes so you could be working with the right code, right? The latest code. And if you want to see what changed, then you could do git status. So if you're unsure that code has changed or you want to see what changed exactly, you could do git status to see that. You could do git add. If you've made some changes and you want to store it on the Git repo, then you could do git add and you could, this dot lets you add all your changes. Git commit -m, like I said before, lets you actually save those changes and like kind of say, all right, I'm committed to these changes. I'm gonna put it in the Git repo. And you could add a message to it. And then finally, once you do all that, you could push it to GitHub. And you do that using git push origin main. And yeah, here we have some golden rules, right? So whenever you start on a code base that you haven't been on for a bit, it's pretty good practice to just do git pull origin main. So make sure you're working with fresh code. Commit often, right? So whenever you make some changes, you want to commit them, right? Just because you don't want to have really big changes, because it's not really that manageable. Say if I commit like 20 files worth of changes, then say if someone is reviewing them, it's going to be really difficult for them to see kind of what was the progression of those changes. And when you write clear commit, and another thing is you have to write clear commit messages, because right here, this example, fix navbar bug on mobile, I'd say that's pretty clear. But if you just like write something in emojis or something and just say fix bug, no one's really gonna know what that means, and they'll have to see kind of the code you committed, which can make it take more time. And yeah, another thing is to push regularly to the remote repository, right? Because you have your local Git repo, which exists on your computer. And when you commit those changes and you actually push them on GitHub, only then can other people see them that are also working on the same code base. So you'd kind of want to do that pretty often, just so other people can see your changes and, adjust if they have to. And I've put some more resources right here. So how to write good commit messages and some other stuff. And so some common mistakes are, say you accidentally commit something. There's actually a bunch, like the people that made Git, they kind of thought of everything, right? So you have a lot of ways to actually fix mistakes that you make. So let's say you have some file and you accidentally commit it, and that file was full of like bugs or it's not ready yet. You just accidentally did it and you realize, oh no, I gotta fix this, right? So you could undo that commit using this command right here, git reset dash dash soft head tilde 1. And so what that does is just remove like the previous commit from your history. And the soft keeps the code changes. If you do dash dash hard, that removes all the code changes you made. And let's say you made some changes on a file and you want to remove them, then you could just do git restore file name.js. Um, this file name.js, it could be any file you want that you've made changes to. Another mistake you could make is committing to a wrong branch. So in Git, you have different branches. And that's useful in case someone is working like on a different feature, right? Someone might be working on a nav bar and you might be working on a footer or something else, right? So you're gonna want to have different branches for that, just so you could kind of have individual spaces to do your own work. And if you're not careful, you could be on the wrong branch and you might commit some mistakes accidentally. Some commands to actually see what branch you're on is git branch. And if you want to create a branch, you do git branch and then the name. If you want to reset the branch one commit, you could do git reset dash dash hard, which removes the code changes and goes back one commit. If you want to switch to a different branch, you could do git checkout, and then you could have the correct branch name, for example. So this could be whatever the branch is called. If you have a merge conflict, which just means that someone committed these changes and they made it to like the remote repository, and say you're trying to like merge these changes, because two people could be working on the same file and there might be some conflict, then you could resolve it like this. So say you pull from the remote repository, you get some changes that someone worked on the file you were working on, and they made some changes that conflict with yours. You could you could essentially edit that. So when you do it inside of GitHub, it'll automatically pull up essentially a merge editor. and that'll let you kind of resolve those issues. And then you just commit it once you've resolved them. So that's on GitHub, on your editor. So if you've accidentally committed like some environment variable or a password, if you do that and you just delete it and then you just commit it again, it's still going to be in the commit history. So what you would do is you'd remove the file and you'd add it to git ignore, and then you change that secret or password. And if you'd like, you could use git filter repo to help rewrite history. So that's useful to avoid those kind of issues. I don't use that, but it's an option. And there's also some more resources over here. And so one of the things that's really important to know is using git ignore, .git ignore. So this is so you don't commit, say, really large files like node modules, which has all your dependencies for a project, or .env, which has all like the secrets and API keys you usually have in your project, which you want to keep secure because if you commit this on GitHub, for say, you commit your Git repo, right? Then if it goes on GitHub and it has your environment variables, your API keys, there's a bunch of bots on there and like crawlers that they'll find it in like seconds and they could use your keys. So it'll be instantly compromised. So you want to make sure you have a .git ignore and put whatever files you want to ignore from Git inside of there. And of course, you want to write good commit messages to kind of specify what your code is doing or what the changes are. Commit early. Always make sure you have the latest changes. And you could use some additional tools like GitHub Desktop to have more of a visual interface because most of this is in the command line. And so that could get confusing if you're not too familiar with the command line. So you could use tools like GitHub Desktop, Gitkraken, or there's some built-in kind of GUI features inside of VS Code right here. So you could actually see the different Git commits and what branch you're on. But normally it would just be in the command line, right? You could do like git branch to see what? We don't have a Git repository in this file yet. Let's think. And then if you really want to get good at Git, you obviously have to use it a lot. So you could do that by just working on projects. You use Git as you go, or if you collaborate with teammates and say hackathons to collaborate, you'd use Git, right? So the more you do that, the better you get at it. You'll memorize all the commands, and then it'll be super easy. And you could also check out a bunch of web resources. Just search up like Git tutorial, and you have very useful resources. So that's the main of it. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm good.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.
Now stop the recording and then I guess we can end the meeting. Stop the sharing. And so.